More infrastructure attacks are imminent. They will keep happening. But why is this bad for preppers? This could definitely cause issues for us here in the future. So for the rest of the video, we're going to talk about why these infrastructure attacks are eventually going to create a big problem for both you and I. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're going to talk about how the Colonial pipeline disruption that's been caused by cyber attack is going to cause problems for both you and I here in the future. For everybody who's a prepper, anyone who prepares, we need to keep an eye out for these situations because eventually they can lead to scenarios that are much worse for what it is we want to do, which is to be better prepared. Now, the Colonial pipeline was disrupted by the cyber attack in the sense of a ransomware attack where the attackers held the computer systems ransom until they received some form of payment, okay? So in that situation, the disruption occurred because everything had to be shut down in order for the facility to try to fix the problem. By doing so, they disrupted the flow of over 100 million gallons of gas per day to the east coast of the United States. This pipeline supplies about 45% of the East Coast's fuel. So if you're preparing for situations where the fuel might just get cut off one day due to a cyber attack and it's something that's completely out of your control and may eventually lead to something much worse for you, then hit the subscribe button below because these things are currently happening and this is going to create a very bad situation for both you and I. Now, included in what is supplied by this pipeline is the U.S. military. Many of their facilities are supplied by this pipeline because it transports gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, okay? The U.S. military has the same fuel consumption as a small country, okay? So just be aware of the fact that somewhere in between Portugal and Peru, as countries who consume the most fossil fuels on the planet, the U.S. military is right in the middle. And that is a huge consumption of fossil fuel by one unit of the country, which is the military. Now understand, that means they are affected by any disruption in the fuel supply, and the US military is obviously part of the national defense. So, how is this so bad for you and I? Because obviously, okay, gas prices might be going up, right? And people are out there starting to fill up their gas tanks and their gas cans and making sure that they are unaffected by these price increases or even shortages due to something like the cyber attack. Totally understandable, a good idea. Understand that once things become a national defense issue, there's a lot of things in place that might not allow for you and I to have access to certain commodities like fuel, or even be allowed to hoard those commodities as well, thanks to the Defense Production Act. Now understand the DPA is something that's been in place for a very long time, since 1950, and it basically gives emergency powers to the president via FEMA to allocate and utilize resources in the way that is best seen fit for the national interest of the country. Now these infrastructure attacks are going to continually occur. They're going to keep happening because they work. Every time these guys go out of their way to implement some kind of a cyber attack, they pull it off. And every time somebody wants to walk up to a pipeline or a gas distribution facility and just shut off a valve, for some reason they're able to. So these infrastructure attacks work and they're often successful, and because of that we're going to see more and more of them. And when the supply gets shut off for things like the US military, suddenly the national defense situation comes into play. It's not just about being able to fuel the cars and keep the economy moving, it's about what's important for national security, okay? So the DPA is used during an emergency, which we've been under for a long time now because of everything going on currently and previously, and it allows the president to allocate materials, services, and facilities for national defense, okay? It also allows the president to decide he can restrict hoarding of necessary supplies. Keep that in mind because often what preppers are accused of doing is hoarding in some form or another. This could easily be applied to anything from fuel to food to medical supplies, All those things were on the table last year. Fuel could easily be as well. And for a lot of the people out there that are out there filling up gas cans, filling up gas tanks, and stockpiling fuel while it's still affordable or accessible, keep in mind that the US military suddenly decides they do not have enough fuel to maintain certain levels of national security, then everything could be allocated away from you and I to the US military. And during that allocation process, if people are found to be hoarding fuel and supplies, that hurts the ability for the US military to maintain national defense, then it's possible for those supplies to be seized. And this could easily keep occurring in this manner. Now, this is going to open the door to the nationalization of energy. Energy departments are often privatized, okay? The energy suppliers out there and distributors out there are private entities for the most part in this country. And during an emergency, the government can then tell those entities who gets priority of energy and how that energy is distributed, and basically tell them that it's all going to go to wherever they decide it needs to go. So, here I have a paper. Now, this is printed up from a report that's annually provided to Congress by FEMA about the different aspects of what it is that FEMA is doing in order to be better prepared in case of an emergency, right? That's what they're all about. Well, here's a section that's relevant to the current situation that I wanted to read to you, and I will post a link to this report in the description as well as in the pinned comment so you guys can check it out. But I want you to understand how these infrastructure attacks are going to lead to certain seizures of assets around the country at some point in time, which may eventually lead to you and I not being allowed to stockpile what it is we feel is necessary for our preparedness. This is why this is bad for preppers. This is why it hurts our ability to prepare. And it's why you need to pay attention to these infrastructure attacks. Not only could the shortages and the price increases of said attacks affect you directly, but it can also lead to a scenario where you and I are not even going to be able to have what we need to survive. So, here we go. This is directly from the FEMA report. DOE, or Department of Energy, is delegated authority through Executive Order 13603 and Executive Order 11790 to implement DPA authority for the production, conservation, use, control, distribution, and allocation of energy. DOE is prepared to use priority ratings in the event of an emergency impacting the energy sector, particularly in support of critical infrastructure protection and restoration for the private sector, as well as state and local governments if necessary. Elements of the Office of Electricity, including the Power Marketing Administrations and the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, did not use DPA Title I authorities during CY 2019. To maintain the appropriate level of preparedness, these elements continue to train on the potential use of DOE's DPA authority in anticipation of its use in emergency response exercises such as the national level exercise. So understand that according to FEMA, the Department of Energy has the ability to do whatever they need to do in the sense of dictating the production, conservation, use, control, distribution, and allocation of energy during an emergency and during any kind of a situation involving national security. So, cybersecurity is directly listed as one of those situations in this report of being of importance in the sense of defending our ability to maintain critical infrastructure. So, these infrastructure attacks will continue, which may eventually lead to the government seizure of energy assets in order to protect national security, which would then lead to our inability to access said assets other than what the government deems necessary for both you and I to acquire. So, I wanted to bring this to your attention because during an SHTF scenario, during an emergency, during a disaster of some kind, the likelihood that these energy companies are going to maintain their private citizenship, basically, when you look at how a CEO is treated in this country, or a corporation, not a CEO. But anyway, they will not maintain that privatization for very long. And the government will definitely seize those assets in order to maintain national security and provide the U.S. military with the energy they need in order to maintain during a disaster. So, the hoarding situation That is also something we have to watch out for. If the president has the authority to dictate that hoarding supplies of certain varieties is no longer allowed, and that said supplies will be seized based on whatever it is the government needs, then that's something else we also have to be worried about. Because as people are prepared, we generally have more supplies than other people, and we generally keep more on hand than the average person. And you can only imagine what the amount that would need to be considered hoarding would be. So, I wanted to bring this to your attention. The DPA is bad for preppers in many ways, and the use of it could be very bad for us here in the future, and it's going to be implemented more and more because of these cyber attacks and because of these infrastructure attacks that keep occurring. So if you have any questions or anything else to add about everything we just went over, leave them in the comments below. Like I said, description, pinned comment, I'll link the report, check it out, some interesting information on there. But all this is happening right now, and we can see what's going to happen in the future just based on what governments like to do, which is to take as much power and control as they can. And this is a great scenario for them to justify some more of that power grab. So without anything else to say about how this whole situation and these attacks on the infrastructures isn't going away anytime soon, and it's bad for both you and I, that's going to be it for Magic Prep.